You need to hear this if you're a fan of ghost stories. This is Kamal's haunting encounter with Ghost plus 69. Kamal, a seasoned ambulance driver, had seen it all, or so he thought. He had navigated the city's labyrinthine streets at all hours, often ferrying those on the brink of life and death. But tonight was different. An oppressive silence blanketed the city as if the night itself was holding its breath. The air hung heavy, thick with a strange, unsettling energy. Kamal's gut churned with unease. He wished he had stayed home. Kamal gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He glanced at the stretcher in the back. It held the body of a young woman, her face pale and lifeless. Her hand clutched a white bundle, small and unmoving. A chill snaked down Kamal's spine. He tried to shake off the feeling, blaming it on the eerie silence that had fallen over the city. "Are you terrified of the unknown lurking in the dark?" The ambulance's siren wailed, a lonely sound in the desolate night. The city, usually a cacophony of noise, was unnervingly quiet. Even the stray dogs that usually roamed these streets were nowhere to be seen. Kamal felt a prickle of fear crawl up his neck. He had never experienced such an unsettling stillness before. The silence was broken by a soft thud from the back of the ambulance. Kamal's heart jumped. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just his imagination playing tricks. But the silence that followed was even more unsettling. It felt heavy, pregnant with anticipation, and it sent shivers down Kamal's spine. He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. Singing, "In the still of the night, shadows come alive. Whispering secrets, making me feel alive." Singing. "Every step I take, the silence seems to break. But the fear inside I just can't shake." Kamal's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, his breath catching in his throat. The corpse of the young woman was sitting upright, her lifeless eyes wide open, staring directly at him. Her pale, bloodless hand still clutched the white bundle, but now it twitched and squirmed. A low growl emanated from the bundle, sending a wave of terror through Kamal's body. He slammed on the brakes, the ambulance screeching to a halt. The sudden stop did nothing to quell the fear that pulsed through his veins. The corpse continued to stare at him, her eyes boring into his soul. Kamal knew he was in the throes of a nightmare, his mind conjuring up impossible horrors, but the growl from the bundle was too real, too primal to ignore. Kamal's heart hammered against his ribs. His mind, struggling to process the impossible, offered no logical explanation. The only thought that cut through the terror was a primal instinct to survive. He had to get away, but his limbs felt heavy, rooted to the spot. He tore his gaze from the mirror, forcing himself to look away from the horror that awaited him in the back. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but the street was deserted. The streetlights flickered ominously, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock his fear. He was trapped. Section 5. A Ride into Darkness. Kamal's hand trembled as he reached for the ignition. He had to get out of there, to escape the nightmare that was unfolding before his very eyes. But as he turned the key, the engine roared to life on its own. The ambulance lurched forward, throwing Kamal back against his seat. They were moving. The city lights blurred into streaks of color as the ambulance sped through the empty streets. Kamal had no control, no agency. He was merely a passenger along for this terrifying ride. The fear that had rooted him to the spot was quickly replaced by a chilling realization. He was not driving this vehicle. Something else was. Section 6. Whispers in the wind. The wind howled outside the ambulance, a mournful, almost human cry. It seemed to whisper Kamal's name, beckoning him into the darkness. He glanced at the rearview mirror, his blood turning to ice. The corpse was gone. The white bundle lay abandoned on the stretcher, pulsating with an eerie light. Kamal's fear morphed into a morbid curiosity. What was in that bundle, and where had the corpse gone? He dared not reach back to touch it, to uncover the mystery it held. He could only watch, transfixed, as the light pulsed, casting grotesque shadows on the ambulance walls. Section 7. The Feast Under the Blood Moon. The ambulance screeched to a halt in a deserted park. Kamal's eyes were drawn to the blood-red moon hanging low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene before him. A group of shadowy figures, their forms distorted and grotesque, huddled around a flickering bonfire. They were feasting. Kamal's stomach lurched as he saw what they were devouring. It was a child, small and frail, its limbs contorted at unnatural angles. The figures tore at its flesh with their bare hands, their laughter echoing through the night, a chilling symphony of madness and hunger. Section 8. Desperate escape. Kamal's body surged with adrenaline. He had to get out of there, to escape the nightmare that was unfolding before his very eyes. He fumbled with the door handle, his fingers slick with sweat. The door swung open, and he stumbled out into the cold night air. He ran, his lungs burning, his legs screaming for respite. But the figures were closing in, their laughter echoing behind him, urging him on. He could hear their heavy footsteps pounding the ground, getting closer with every stride. He didn't dare look back. Section 9. Facing the horror. Kamal tripped, falling hard onto the unforgiving asphalt. Pain shot through his ankle, but he couldn't stop. Not now. He scrambled to his feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. As he turned to flee, he came face to face with one of the figures. Its face, a mask of decay and hunger, was inches from his own. Its eyes, two burning embers in the darkness, bored into his soul. A low growl rumbled in its chest, and its putrid breath washed over Kamal, the stench of death clinging to it like a shroud. Section 10. Lost in the abyss. Kamal stared into the face of horror, his mind teetering on the brink of madness. The figure reached for him, its hands skeletal and cold. Kamal screamed, a primal sound of fear and despair. The world around him dissolved into a dizzying kaleidoscope of colors and shadows. Then, everything went black. The silence that followed was deafening. Gone were the grotesque figures, the blood moon, the chilling laughter. There was nothing but an empty park and the faint scent of decay lingering in the air. Kamal lay sprawled on the ground, his eyes staring blankly at the starless sky. He didn't remember, he couldn't remember.